Welcome to the Undiscovered Gems podcast, hosted by NBA legend and business powerhouse Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds.
Hi, I'm Charles Smith. I'm your host for Undiscovered Gems. Welcome back to the show. Today, we have a guest who's appearing again, Mr. Randy Swaim. Randy has got a lot of things going on today. Since we last spoke, Randy, we talked about him being a Marshall Goldsmith executive coach. But now, Randy's a founding fellowship partner at the Institute for Organization, and he's a
organizational neuroscience.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
He's at the Institute for Organization Neuroscience. And his title there is he's a neuroplastician, and we'll get into that. The other thing we want to talk about that's really great, and I'm happy for Randy, he's got his autobiography out on Amazon, and you can get it right now. The title of his autobiography is Bring Freedom to Potential. Now, it's always great when someone puts an autobiography out and other people are interested in it. And we're great to have Randy on the show today because we can talk about all these things and the audience can really see what you're into today. So start us off, Randy. How did you get to where you are today? You got your book out there and you're at the Institute for Organizational Leadership and you're a neuroplastician. What is all this?
Well, the big thing on this is, as you said, I was an executive coach, and this aspect of leadership has been such a part of who I am. And I will say this, that for the last 12 years or so, I've had a number of people that I connected with that said, you got a story that needs to be told, and wanted me to start writing it. And so, that it's been kind of cool in the way that people have seemed to, experience me, I guess, in some respects. And I've just been very humbled because I think it was about maybe a year and a half ago that a friend of mine that I've kind of worked with a little bit and been friends with for 12 years is he's got a doctor. He's got his PhD in neuroscience, and he is the founding person for ION, the Institute for Organizational Neuroscience. And he reached out and asked me if I would be willing to be a founding fellowship partner with them, where I kind of work with them as I can and all that kind of stuff. So that is kind of cool. And like you said, one of the things that I did, they also have a group that is about a year old now that's called NPN Hub, and it's neuroscience and neuroplastician people that understand. And the reason that is so critical when you're talking about leaders and you're talking about making your teams more effective and being able to reach radical results that nobody would have ever expected. Guess what? You got to be aware of how the brain really works. And sometimes it comes up with amazing results, and sometimes it kind of holds you back a little bit. And are you aware of those aspects about how the brain gets involved? And if you're aware of that, you can lead your people better. And so it's really cool with that. And I went through some of their basic training and was certified by them as a master level neuroplastician, kind of thing, which I'm very humble at, and I appreciate that, and I love it. And so, that part of it has been there with the autobiography and the fact that it's out. And I will share this, that some of the people that have been reading it and some of the people that have just completed reading it for the first time, some of the comments they have made has been nothing short of amazing to me. It sort of blows my mind. And so all of that is part of what I do. I still bring all of this to training and certifying jet pilots in aviation and all that. And then just to mention it, it looks like Hollywood is planning on trying to complete a 78-minute movie documentary of my life and journey by the end of June, and to be published on movie platforms and also be available on DVDs and things like that. So just a lot of things that I would have never guessed 10 years ago. And a lot of that stuff is kind of where I am. I'm just sort of keeping the feet going forward and just kind of watching for how the factors kind of come into be and everything. So it's exciting. It's I've had people. I say this as a comical word, but I've had people ask me when I'm going to retire, and I go, you know what? When I take my last breath, because I'm going to run through the tape, kind of thing, whatever that is.
I get it. No, understood. Hey, let's talk about the. You mentioned how the brain works.
Okay.
Give our audience a kind of we don't have to go with a deep dive, but a high level. How are you tying in executive coaching?
Yeah.
How the brain works? Where's that handshake and that connection take place?
Well, one of the things, and I'll just give you a couple of very quick examples, but as a coach or as a leader in your team, you have to understand a little bit about how the brain works so that you can truly understand even the nonverbal communications or the reaction that the person has. If they are just trying to give you what they think is just the right academic answer, you're not doing the job. And I will, in fact, I'll just share this as one example. But I had trained a guy years ago. I think this was probably 8 years ago or something like that, and certified for his recurrent check ride. He's been a pilot in that airplane for a while. Well, guess what? He and the co-pilot were involved in an accident where they both died. And just because I was a small part of it, the National Transportation Board wanted to interview me. And what was amazing, just to get it was a 2-hour interview, and to make a long story short, they all came up to me afterwards and shook my hand and just lauded me for kind of how I interacted with them and what I said. And there was one case, one guy was right across the table who was a psychological expert. And I said, "Oh, you and I have some common ground." And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Outside of here, I'm an executive coach and a neuroplastician for neuroscience. So it's not exactly the same, but it's very aligned." And he said, "Thank you for sharing that. That's good to know." Well, at the end of 2 hours, and I'm not sharing anything that's private. It's all public out there and stuff. But they the last question that was asked was by this guy, and he looked at me and he said, "Randy, based on your experience with him when you hear, is there anything that you experienced that you said could have predicted this accident?" And good question, but I understood the nature of that question and how it wasn't correct, where most people would just try to answer it yes or whatever. I went like this, and I motioned my hand toward him like this. And I said, "I want you to understand, you have my compliments for asking that question." And I said, because you know what? That is a critical question for us to look at. And I said, "You have my professional and my personal compliments." And then I said this, I said, "Before I answer the question, let me tell you that the vast majority of people across the industry would answer that question yes. Not because they know the right answer, but because they're trying to get the right academic answer that they think you want to hear." And then I looked at him and I said, and I went like this. I said, "Now you and I would have a leg up on answering that apart from everybody else in this industry because of our expertise outside of aviation direct." And I looked at him and I said, "But you know what? You and I would be hard pressed to answer that question in the definitive and deductive nature that it calls for. Because in order to make the deductive link between those two, you have to take some of the factors that either are at play or could be at play and throw them in the dumpster." And I said, as soon as you've done that, you've ejected from the entire deductive nature of your question. And I had a couple of examples in my mind had he asked further, but he knew right where I was going because of his expertise. And he looked at me and he said, and that was all. And what was amazing is nobody else had a question. And the lead questioner, before he turned off the recorder, he looked at me and he said, "Randy, I think we've done all we need to ask for you." And he looked at me and he said, "But there's something I'd like to just share with you before we close up." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, this is what he told me, his exact quote. He said, "It is clear you're a subject matter expert, and we want to thank you for coming and talking to us." And I looked at him and I said, "Gentlemen, you need me to come talk to you anytime, pick up the phone and give me a call, because you know what? We're all in this for the same reason." But it's that sort of awareness. It's not about just trying to convince people that a right academic answer that you wanted to say is right. You have to understand how the brain may be hiding things, why it may be taking a shortcut just to go somewhere, to go to some answer or whatever, when it may not even be real. And when you're in a challenging environment, like sometimes it happens when you're in a cockpit of an airplane, but also guess what? In your leadership position at your business or your company, guess what? Not all the factors are predictable that are coming on the scene here. And neuroscience, you got to be aware of how your brain is truly getting in right to come up with the truly radical and correct and amazing solution. And so all of those aspects are part of why that is such value to leaders who are trying to lead their teams. It's not just about telling them what to do. It's not just about going to some superficial answer. There's a lot of people in society out there, not everybody, but there's a lot of people that, go with their academic answer, but if it doesn't work out right, they just cast blame on everything else. It should have been like this. Well, you know what? It wasn't. The factors were not like that. And so that's just a little bit of a picture of that. But when you're talking about the neuroscience and the awareness of how that thinking happens and things like that, are you aware of when your people are doing that effectively? Guess what? At some point, somebody that works for you may come up with a solution and an insight that you go, whoa, yeah, let's do that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of aspects about that. That could be a whole 2-hour class on it or something, but it just gives one little picture of the neuroscience and the applicability of it. And, are you just going to rote academic little simplistic things, or do you truly see the dramatic success aspect out of it? And you can get your team to really see that. And you know what? When challenging factors come on scene, sometimes can they handle that and still get there? And all of that is a lot in what the brain sees, what it doesn't see, how it gets in the way, how it just goes to rote academics to feel better, or does it really get clarity on where the real dramatic outcome truly is? And so that's just a picture of it.
So Randy, when I hear you speak, it's almost like, you're talking about the brain as if it's something unto itself that is not attached to the human being. When you say how the brain works now, as human beings, we only use a small portion of our brain in our lifetime. So
that's true.
That is a fact. However, when I hear you speak, isn't it the thoughts of the human being that drives the brain to do certain things?
Yes.
But you're talking as if the brain does things on its own. So I wanted
And here's the thing: when you look at neuroscience and you look at the aspects of your brain and just parts of them, keep in mind the brain releases neurotransmitters for dopamine, which makes you feel proud, norepinephrine, which makes you want to fight or flight kind of thing, and all this. But there's two parts of the brain. One is the cerebellum, right back here in the back, and the cerebellum is kind of where it has just a lot of habit patterns. This is what I'm used to. This is what should be there. But the frontal lobe is what is generally missing in a lot of people. The frontal lobe is the processing center of your brain. And the bottom line is, to what extent everything you said is correct, and the brain drives the neurotransmitters, it drives the feelings, and then all of that kind of drives the behavior and things of that nature. But are you aware of when it's just going back to the cerebellum to just, well, this is kind of what I expected to be? Well, you know what? Maybe it isn't today. Does your frontal lobe processing truly get in the way to see the real situational awareness of the situation you are in? And that is a key critical aspect that leaders not only need to have within themselves, but have clarity on how they need to lead and develop and grow that even within their team. And and so it's just there's a lot of ways where that can be very simple. There was one guy I was teaching as a pilot, but he came into the briefing room, and he said, "I may need to hire you as a coach outside of here." And I said, "Well, why and all this? What do you hope to accomplish?" And he said, "I got to stop smoking." I went, "Okay, well, kind of thing." But then I looked at this. I said, "I'm going to ask you one question, and if you can answer this question for yourself, you can overcome it without my help." And he was like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Here's the question. When you feel the strongest drive to get a cigarette or to smoke or whatever, what's going on? What do you experience when you feel that?" And he said exactly what I thought he would say. He said, "Well, when not much is going on and I'm just kind of at peace and not have to do a lot and all this." I said, "I understand that. So if you get clarity on that, let me just tell you, now it'll take about 6 or 8 weeks for your brain to rewire stuff. But you know what? At the point of attack, what can you do to overcome that in your processing here so that it reorients some of the habit patterns back here to overcome that?" And he said, "You know what, Randy, thank you." And I said, "Yeah." So, but that's just another sort of picture of that. But you're right. The brain does drive all that. A lot of people used to say that the emotions drive our brain, but modern research realizes just the opposite, that it's your brain that drives the emotions, and that can kind of help drive the behavior and stuff. But the bottom line is that's kind of a key part of this whole concept. But you know what? Even in business, in leading your teams, regardless of what it is, whether it's whether it's flying airplanes, whether it's in the military, whether it's in the just your business for whatever business you're involved in. If you're working at McDonald's or whatever, just selling hamburgers to people or whatever role you're in, these are some awareness aspects that you have to be aware of if you want radical results in what you're doing. And that's just a little bit of a picture, like I say, of this aspect of neuroscience and that awareness in how it's going. And the other part of it is, if you think about it as a leader, if you see people on your team constantly going to the habit patterns back here, or just going to rote academic, responses or whatever, how are you going to lead them different? What questions are you going to ask to get them to really pursue and prospect that vision, that picture?
Yeah, let's break that down. So let me give you a let's paint a picture, give a scenario to our audience. You have a leader, a corporate leader, and he directs, or she or he directs, or deals with their direct report.
Yeah.
In a way where the person comes to them for guidance and information. And the leader always, like you said earlier, the leader always tells them, here's how you handle it, here's what to do, here's how you got to make it happen. Then when that leader goes on vacation, it's not really a vacation, because all the staff is constantly calling that leader, because how that leader dealt with them was always telling them what to do. So they didn't create their own neural pathways on decision making, right?
Yep.
Now the leader, as you mentioned, goes back to the cerebellum and has their patterns and how they do things. How do you deal with that leader and coming to the frontal lobe to change their perspective on how they deal with the people that are under them?
And the way you got to do it is you got to know what the correct questions to ask are. And in fact, if you want, I'll kind of share one little example of that. It's a girl that I was dating back in, holy cow, 28 years ago, kind of thing. So, kind of thing. But she was a person that worked at a business, and I forgot exactly which one it was because it's been 28 years or whatever. But she was in the project, and basically I was working about the same time also And this is before I became a coach. This is just the leadership that had been developed in me. But she was basically took on a project where she was going to be leading 4 different little teams in this. And what's amazing is, as she was talking about it, she was not in direct authority over any one of them. And there was one day where she called me up at my phone where I was working, and she was talking about that out of those 4, there was one group that didn't finish this one thing on time. And she said, "Oh, my boss is going to hate this," because he was kind of the kind of person you're talking about, kind of thing, with the just you dummies, you better do this, get that kind of thing, kind of thing. And because that's what he was used to. And and what was amazing, she was afraid of having to go share that with him. And I told her, I said, "Well, let me ask you this. If you were in his shoes, what would you do?" And I don't mean just make it simple. What is the success factor that you would apply? And she went, "Boy, it's an interesting question." I said, "Come up with an answer for yourself." And then she kind of mentioned it and came up with her first thing. I said, "So are you telling me that you have an answer? You have a way of communicating to him so that you're not just asking him for the solution, but you can tell him what you need to do?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Cool. Sounds like you're where you need to be." Well, guess what? She called me back 15 minutes later, and she said, "You're amazing." And I went, "What?" And she said she went in and sat down and talked to her boss about what that situation was. But then she said, "Now here's what I would recommend to advance this and keep it going," and stuff like that. And she said she had never seen her boss's reaction this way, but she said the boss just looked at her and said, "Good job, good strategy." And she went, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, good one." And as she was getting up to leave, he goes, "Hey, Norma." And she stopped. She looked back. He said, "Good job. Thank you." And she said, "He's never said that to me or anybody else that I know of." But the bottom line is, when you're talking about leaders like that have that kind of old school mindset, there are ways that you can help it turn into a better relationship, a better team, a better interaction, and all of that. But you got to have the right questions in mind so you can really get clarity on that and make it happen. And so that was just sort of a picture of kind of what you're talking about. And he changed his interaction. Why? Because she gave him something different to respond to. And I will tell you this, that I think in a lot of cases, leaders that kind of act the way you were kind of implying there, a lot of times those leaders just feel like there's no other way to do this. This is what I got to do. Well, you know what? Really? And I might say, what else is there to do? What's a different option that'll get you there? And it's like, you ask those right questions. And you know what? It's this aspect of understanding how the brain works and how it constantly gravitates back to what I've thought for the last 50 years or whatever, as opposed to the real processing of, you know what? There is a way we can get here. Let's join together and find out. Let's join together and make this happen. You do that and some amazing results can happen and amazing success can happen. So it's just something to think about when you're talking about neuroscience and all of this stuff that we're talking about.
Randy, you mentioned how the brain, let me digress for a second.
Sure.
For a long time, it's been stated that decisions, especially in leadership and corporate, are not made based on emotion. And you have a gentleman by the name of Daniel Kahneman, who won a Pulitzer Prize by analyzing, and I think it was in 1976. He won a prize by saying that, or proving that all decisions are based on emotion versus the impulse, and then we make the decision and we go into rationalization and examine the decision. And then you're saying that and this has been a tug of war for years, and then you're saying that
because that's the old school thoughts
yeah,
and the
okay.
old school research. Go ahead.
So you can pick it up from there. So what is the and how is that
with the and this comes from neuroscience awareness and all that for sure, but it also, the new research is really coming out and realizing that it is our brain that is controlling our emotions. Because if we're operating in fear, as an example, if we're operating because we feel like, man, there's just no option here, we can't do this, why do they want us to do this, I'm kind of being humorous with that. But if our brain is kind of releasing the neurotransmitters of norepinephrine, that's where you want to fight or flight, either run away from them or just knock them down, kind of thing. But guess what? If you have a certain aspect of oxytocin or some of those, which talks about oneness and team and things like that, guess what? If you get the real picture in your brain of how you want this team to truly be and how we're really going to get to radical success, guess what? It's your brain focusing and your brain having a tendency to control the neurotransmitters, which controls a lot of the emotions. And so it used to be that the emotions drove our brain. That's the old school, research, and all the newest research today's world really talks about the other way around. And that's where neuroscience has come from, because understanding the brain and how it works. And if you are really, learning how to get your processing going, to imagine, to find the real results and the real success, and the success that makes everybody on your team go, yeah. When you have people coming up to your team and going, yeah, and all that. And you know what? When they come up to the leader and they're trying to laud the leader and his team, and he says, yeah, it's the team, and he gives credit to them. Now, did he have a role in it? Yeah. But if he takes all this stuff on himself, that sends a different picture to your team. But if he, helps the team truly experience dramatic success and amazing results that makes them go, oh, wow, yeah. And you know what? They may learn something that causes them to be successful the next time there's a challenge that comes on scene. And all of that sort of stuff. So the bottom line is that's just a little kind of piece of the neuroscience aspect and why that's important in any area of leadership. Because, to what extent, instead of just pointing fingers and trying to threaten and control your people, to what extent are you really getting their brains involved to where they see dramatic success? And you look at them, and there's been one time when I was the manager at Griffiths Air Force Base over in Rome, New York, that my team was coming up with some notes, and it was kind of amazing because I was standing there and they knew the boss was in the room. And one guy sat down, he was going to make some notes on just some of the things they had thought about. And he realized that the boss is in the room. And so he froze and he just looked at me. And you know what I did? All I did is I winked at him and I nodded my head.
That's great.
That's all I did, because they felt courageous. They felt that I was with them and that they were with me, and there was a real synergy. And I will tell you this, that the company, the worldwide company on that at that time, this is, holy cow, back in 1978 or so, they
I'm looking at the time and I can't believe how fast this went, because doing the dialogue with you. But we have to begin to wrap this up. So I want to give you an opportunity, sorry to cut you off, to finish that story and we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Yeah. And basically that I will tell you this, that the company published something and they sent me a copy of it. And one of the key phrases, and I actually included this because this was sort of a part of the story in my autobiography, because it's a piece of my autobiography. But the quote that they put in there is, they said, quote unquote, Randy took a problem site and turned it into the showcase of the company in minimum time, unquote. And you know why? Because I did it very different. I brought true leadership and not control freak stuff. And guess what? Understanding how the brain works is key in that.
Yep. And Randy, look, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Time just got away from both of us. I'm sitting here enjoying
it's an honor being here.
Yeah, I'm enjoying everything that I'm hearing, but really appreciate you coming on. Very informative show, and continued success to you. Thank you for being a part of Undiscovered Gems.
You know what? It's an honor being here, and I got to tell you, it's just a pleasure meeting you these two shows, and I just appreciate who you are.
All right. Thanks a lot, Randy. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Undiscovered Gems with our host, Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds. Brought to you by Pods Entertainment Group.